The Reds have made a flurry of minor league signings, adding to the depth without answering the one question they need to answer. We'll get into that on today's Locked On Reds.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Aloha and welcome in. You are Locked On Reds, your daily source for all things Cincinnati Reds. I'm Stephen Offenbaker. He's Jeff Carr. We love baseball. We also love these Cincinnati Reds, and we have taken that love of the game, that love for this team, and we have turned it into information for you. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Once again, welcome into an Aloha Friday live edition of the show where we are going to be taking your questions and comments and giving you our answers as best we can. We're going to be digging into the signings of Tony Kemp and Mike Ford. Moves the needle, right? That's the missing pieces. Not really, but it does beg us to ask a question and then try to answer it about what they are doing in the outfield in Cincinnati. We're also going to dig into the probable starters for the first 5 spring training games of the year. Hunter Green starting? No. Nick Lodolo, first game of spring? Carson Spires. We're going to get into that, plus your questions and comments. Before we get started, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers, join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And where we are going to get started, Jeffrey, Mike Ford, Tony Kemp, we're going to the World Series.
The depth, the amazing depth, the organizational depth. Look, the Reds have something in droves, and that is they have a deep infield and they have a deeply talented pitching staff, albeit with question marks, but there's lots of talent that can be had on the mound. They have not answered this one question, Steve, and we've asked this question since the beginning of the offseason. Who is going to be the third outfielder to play against left-handed pitching? And as of right now, it kind of feels like they're just going to answer that in-house. They're going to roll out Jonathan India out there. Maybe they move Noel Marte or CES. Maybe it's Stuart Fairchild. Maybe it's Jose Barrero. I don't know. But as of right now, they don't seem to be moving toward adding someone.
No, I think at this point, the best they can hope for as far as the signing of an outside right-handed bat is going to be near roster cutdowns towards the end of spring training. Maybe there'll be somebody that intrigues them that they'll want to pick up for that 26th man on the roster. I think it's much more likely, as you're saying right now, that they're either going to roll with Barrero or Fairchild as the 26th man, and the solution to the outfield problem is going to be Jonathan India and CES. I do not believe it's going to be Noel Marte. The more I think about it and the more we hear about it, CES is going to get some reps out there, and hopefully one of those guys can play the outfield. I mean, it's one of those deals where you're going to sacrifice defensive prowess, keep some bats in the lineup. I think that is the decision that Nick Krall and David Bell have made, that they want X amount of bats or at bats for X amount of guys. And in order to accomplish that, there's going to be some guys that play out of position. Jonathan India is going to just have to be willing to play anywhere and everywhere. And even if he hasn't played there before, CES, in order to get that rotation right between Noel Marte and Jeimer Candelario, CES, it makes sense to me, is going to have to get some reps in corner outfield, probably right field.
I also feel like, and I don't necessarily know, and I saw the headline, but I haven't drilled in on the article just yet. Charlie Goldsmith had an article that in his tweet, whenever he shared it, he said the Reds feel like they have 5 everyday outfielders. To me, that means, and I don't know because they have not done it to this point, but that might mean that we're going to see Will Benson against lefties. And that might mean we might see Jake Fraley against lefties. And they haven't, albeit in tiny sample sizes, really shown that they deserve at-bats against lefties. I think, and this kind of goes back, you remember, like, it was like 3 or 4 years ago when it was like, boy, the Reds got 4 outfielders, man. They got Jesse Winker. They got a couple of different guys. They got Phil, right? They got Phil. They got to play Phil. And it's like, it didn't quite work out that way. I just don't know. Like, I want to believe that Will Benson or Jake Fraley or both can figure out how to be an everyday outfielder, because their value to the team and the team's, performance will just increase exponentially. But it feels like they're saying that because they didn't make a move.
Right. Well, the problem there is, though, what if they can't?
Right.
We've talked about this whole, our guy, Chad Dotson. Hope is not a strategy. He's been saying that for a decade. This is using hope as a strategy. I hope that Will Benson can figure it out against left-handers. I hope that Jake Fraley can figure it out against left-handers. Well, what if they don't? Conversely, they're also hoping Jonathan India can play a serviceable corner outfield. They're also hoping that CES can play a serviceable corner outfield. There's a whole lot of hope in the outfield. Not a lot of answers. But at the end of the day, what we do know is that Jonathan India can get streaky and he can hit well against left-handed pitching at times. We do know that CES is going to mash left-handed pitching. So if you want one solid fact for this outfield, is even with running India and CES out there, not knowing if they're going to be able to catch a ball or not, and their at bat comes up, you can count on them to be able to hit the ball. You can't say the same thing for Fraley and Benson. You can't say that they're going to be able to hit that left-handed pitcher. And granted, small sample size, they haven't been able to thus far.
What's more likely to happen? What's more likely? Because I wonder, like, is it more likely that either India or CES proves to be competent defensively in the outfield, or is it more likely that Will Benson or Jake Fraley hits lefties?
Oh, it's more likely that CES can play right field for sure. Of those two questions, hitting the lefties or playing the outfield, CES can play right field. I think he's going to be able to play right field out there. Jonathan India, I think he's going to be able to run down fly balls.
Yeah.
I don't think Jonathan India is not going to be able to catch pop-up. My problem with Jonathan India comes when there's a shooter down the gap and he's got to try and throw somebody out. That's where my questions for Jonathan India come into play. So of those choices, Jeff, I think you go with those infielders turning into outfielders and being able to play out there.
It feels like you're going to have to almost strategize with the infield. Like, look, we got India in left field. If there's a ball hit to the corner or something like that, cutoff man's got to run like halfway out there. Like, cutoff man's got to be out in outfield, which you could do that with Ellie. I mean, you think about this, if you've got a corner, the ball is in the corner of Great American, and I'm picturing Great American here. I know there's other ballparks they will play in, and God forbid, imagining Jonathan India trying to play outfield in Colorado. But anyway, let's look at Great American for right now. Ball goes into the corner. He's got to get it into the infield. Dude's rounding second. Ellie's out there. Maybe they can set up a nice relay because Ellie's pretty good on the relay stuff. But you absolutely have to have that ingrained into every infielder, whether it be Ellie, whether it be Noelvi Marte at third or whoever's playing third. If Matt McLean's at second or whoever's at second, they got to know that if the ball gets deep into the left field and Jonathan India is playing out there, they got to set up a relay and they got to do it quick.
Carrie was on the same page with you while we were waiting to get started there, Jeff. Carrie posted this in the chat. Krall's a sneaky move. India weak arm left field. Ellie takes the cutoff in shallow left and throws runners out at home, setting up the base runners. Brilliant. Carrie is on it.
Carrie's on it.
And that's where having a really strong arm shortstop will come into play here. I think you're right. If Jonathan India is in left field, you've got to tell your cutoff guy, get out there fast and be ready, because he's not going to be able to get the ball to you in a timely manner. And, I feel like we're being a little unfair to Jonathan India, actually. It's not that he can't get the ball from left field to shortstop. It's not that he can't do these things physically. It's that if you compare his arm to other left fielders, they're going to be able to do it faster. I mean, we're making it sound like Jonathan India is going to be out there in left field sucking his thumb, not able to handle the position or know what he's doing. And that's not fair.
I want to bring in Paul O'Neill to learn him how to kick the ball in. I think that would be a weapon. We bring Paul O'Neill in. He's going to be able to teach him how to kick that ball in. No, I think of this like there were multiple times last year where it felt like, and TJ Friedel has amazing range and a great glove. The one thing he doesn't really have is a good arm. Like his arm is fine, it's serviceable. That's what I think of when I think of Jonathan India. There were people that were not afraid to run on TJ Friedel, and it happened multiple times. That's now going to be 2/3 of your outfield, against left-handed pitching. So that's going to be a little bit tough for me. And I don't know, man. Like you're going to have a very solid working strategy. The Reds fielding strategy when the ball's in the outfield against left-handed pitching is going to have to be a lot more moving parts than you would typically otherwise think.
Carrie, that's not nice. As long as India doesn't use his plantar foot to kick. Oh my God, Jeff, just get us into the next segment.
Yeah, let's do that. I noticed though, like the moves, the Tony Kemp, the Mike Ford signings, it's not really anything. It's depth, right? Depth. It's just it begs the question. It just begs the question what are the Reds going to do in the outfit, and that remains to be seen. We'll see how it works out. But I know this: the Reds have announced the first 5 probable starters of spring training games. And if the starter for the very first spring training game is any indication that Carson Spires is going to be your opening, I'm just kidding. Anyway, we're going to talk about what you can expect and what we can expect from these starts coming up next. Before we talk about that, though, I want to tell you about one of today's sponsors, and that is Backblaze. Backblaze is what you need if you want to keep your data safe. This era of digital information and stuff, data is gold. And if you want to keep it safe, Backblaze is the way to do it. They protect all data on your machines automatically. Backblaze offers multiple restore options as well, including rapid recovery in the event of data loss or ransomware. Start with a free trial today and then get unlimited cloud backup for Macs, PCs, and businesses as a whole for just $99 a year. Just go to backblaze.com/lockedonmlb. You can access your backed up data from anywhere in the world using Backblaze's web app or their iOS or Android apps. Few data protection services have the recommendations that Backblaze does. I mean, you can look at you got New York Times, Inc. Magazine, Macworld, PC World, all of the computer magazines. They all love Backblaze, and they definitely recommend you check them out. You can receive a fully featured no-risk free trial at backblaze.com/lockedonmlb. Go there, try it out, and start protecting yourself from potential bad times today. That's backblaze.com/lockedonmlb. Thanks as always for making Locked On Reds your first listen, second listen, all the listens every single day. For those of you joining us here today that checked out the episode that we had for you, we finished up our conversation with John Sadak. If you missed any of that, we had kind of a two-parter. We talked with John about the roster and how exciting it is and how the Reds shake up against projection systems, how they shake up in the division. A lot of great stuff from the Reds play-by-play voice from Valley Sports Ohio. You ought to go check that out. And coming up next week, there's so much more spring training news to get to. A lot of different headlines we need. I think we're going to dive a little bit more into this idea of 5 everyday outfielders. We've got to kind of break that down a little bit more. That's going to be coming up on Monday's episode. And before we jump into our content here, reminder, Locked On's got the first ever national sports streaming channel on YouTube. Check out Locked On Sports today because 24/7 we have you covered on all the biggest sports stories from the local experts like Steve and myself and our national shows that cover every league. Go to Locked On Sports today and subscribe to the first ever national sports streaming channel on YouTube. All right, Steve, Reds, they announced their first 5 probable starters. I wrote about this just briefly over at InsideTheReds.com, but we have Carson Spires on Saturday going up against the Cleveland Guardians. Then on Sunday, Hunter Green is pitching against the Los Angeles Angels. No Shohei Ohtani there. Then Monday, the Reds have a split squad, a couple of games there. You've got one, I believe, against the Seattle Mariners, which Andrew Abbott will be pitching in. And then the other game, Nick Martinez is pitching against the Milwaukee Brewers, I believe. And then Tuesday, the Reds face the Chicago Cubs, and Frankie Montas is pitching as a whole. And I don't necessarily want to get into like too micro of okay, from this pitcher, this is what you want to see, and from this pitcher, this is what you want to see. Like, on the whole, Nick Krall has told us that this spring training is going to mean a lot to these pitchers. It's going to mean a lot to guys who are fighting for spots in the rotation, spots in the bullpen, because there are so many talented guys now that are fighting for those spots. For you, what's the main thing you're looking for?
I'm looking for guys to be consistent. I'm looking for guys to work on those pitches that we've been waiting for them to work on. Now is the opportunity. Now is the time. Spring training for pitchers is much less about results-based viewing, and it's more about eye tests and them getting their work in successfully, how they recover the next couple days after the start, how their body feels, especially pitchers that are coming off an injury. So every time Montas makes a start this spring, the next day, the next 2 days, there's going to be, how's your shoulder? How does it feel? Are you able to move your arm? What's your range of motion? Graham Ashcraft, how's your foot? Does the toe hurt? Are you able to walk without a limp? What's going on with you? Nick Lodolo, how is that shin? How are you feeling? How's your plant leg there? Are you able to play long toss right now without any pain? Those are the things you're looking for from the starting pitchers. When you look at a Carson Spires getting this start in the first spring game, and there's nobody that plays for this team that cares about the first start of the first spring game. We're just starved for baseball news. So,
right.
We care about it. But the fact of the matter is Graham Ashcraft's not quite ready to go. Nick Lodolo's not quite ready to go as far as being out there day one. We'll see those guys in the rotation. And in the meantime, you've got other starting pitchers that you need to stretch out. Spires is one of them. He's not competing for a 1 through 5 job right now. He's trying to cement his place on the list at 7 or 8 or 9. That's where he ranks in this deal. And he's trying to get himself ready to head to Louisville and start his season there. So he's just getting out there, getting his work in, facing some hitters, getting this spring training started. So not reading too much into it at all, but I am interested, as the first couple times through, the answers to those questions I just asked a few minutes ago after each of these pitchers coming off injuries makes that start, how they feel, both during and after, because that's going to tell us a lot about what the group of 1 through 5 is going to look like when this team does make its way to Cincinnati at the end of March.
And to add on to that, don't overreact. In fact, don't react at all to runs allowed, hits allowed. Probably react a little bit, not go crazy, because they're going to be working on some different pitches, but react a little bit to, walks and strikeouts and things like that. But overall, the statistics of spring training don't matter. I would love to introduce you to some guys that have had amazing spring trainings in the past and where they are now. Guys like Amir Garrett, who just signed a minor league deal, and guys like Neftali Soto, who was an absolute master in spring training, but tell me what he did in the regular season. For anyone, not just the Reds. It's not a thing where statistics mean a hill of beans. I mean, on Sunday, if Hunter Green gets his brains beat in, but we saw that he threw a curveball a bunch and a splitter a bunch, I'm going to be happy, because I want to see him throw those secondary stuff. That's what I'm looking for. And also,
and as a side note to your don't get excited about the totals, if Hunter Green's striking out guys with the curveball and the splitter, go ahead and get excited a little bit.
Yes,
because
get a little bit.
That's what we want to see.
Yeah, get a little bit excited about that. But yeah, don't go crazy on the numbers. And I also want to shout out a friend of the podcast, Doug Gray, over at Red Leg Nation, actually has the rundown of pitchers that we will see in the first spring training game. So Carson Spires will start it. There are a few guys who we expect to be in the mix for the major leagues, and then a few guys who are dark horses or maybe some organizational depth that are on this list. But you have Carson Spires starting the game. Fernando Cruz is slated to get into the game as well. I know we love him. I know I love him. I think his path to the major leagues now is a little bit more cloudy with all the additions that they have, but he is a key member of this bullpen at some point this season. Then Buck Farmer is also going to pitch in this first spring training game. Then you have 2 non-roster invitees in Justin Bruihl, who's a lefty, and Brooks Kriske, who's a righty. So those guys will probably be more organizational depth, but these are the guys that we can see on Saturday. I'm actually kind of excited to see that Fernando Cruz is getting in some action on this first game as well. And I think it is broadcast. It is not broadcast by John Sadak and Barry Larkin and Chris Welsh. It's broadcast by the Cleveland Guardians guys, but it will be on Valley Sports Ohio on Saturday.
I can't wait to watch some Reds baseball. It's
Yeah.
been too long. We've
One day
been
away.
excited for a long time, and I'm excited to get things going. For me, here's the things to watch for in the first game. Everybody that comes into this game healthy leaves this game healthy. That is the only true takeaway from spring training number 1. That's going to be exciting to see the guys back out on the field, get a look at a few of the newer players as far as pitchers go here in the first week of spring training. Looking forward to seeing Suter out there pitching. Looking forward to our first look at Pagan, our first look at Martinez. He's going to be starting one of these games, I think, on the split squad day. Martinez is going.
Nick Martinez. Yeah, he's pitching against the Brewers, I think, on Monday.
So it's going to be good to get a look at these guys. We've been hearing about them in some cases in Pagan since December. It feels like Pagan's been on this team for 5 years, and we haven't seen him pitch yet.
Well, and remember too, he's hurt right now. He's going to be a little bit behind because he had I just blanked on the injury, but it's an injury that's going to.
He's only delayed like a week or so, though, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of guys that are on the mound like him. Like Pagan there is in the lineup, of course, our buddy Matt McLean, and as well as I think Noelvi Marte will also be out for these first couple of spring training games. There's still a consistent reporting about all of these players who are missing the first couple of spring training games, that as of right now, there is no danger to them missing regular season time. We'll see how that's another thing to keep an eye on. We'll see how that progresses.
Right. Because they've talked about the injuries and we've heard, Montas is coming off the injury, Lodolo coming off, Graham Ashcraft coming off the injury. All these guys are coming off injuries. They're not truly delayed. If you read between the lines and look at what the Red speak has been saying, they're not truly delayed. They're being handled cautiously, and they're doing the work they're supposed to be doing. They're just not throwing them to the fire. They're being cautious to ensure that they do get to opening day. So I'm okay with that. I'm not worried about the injury list per se so far, because none of the people that are delayed, quote unquote, are more than a week, are more than in jeopardy of not making any spring starts, or not in jeopardy of not being ready when the season starts. So I'm not super worried about the injured list right now.
I agree with that. And again, it's just about updates and how things move forward from here, but I'm excited to see some baseball. What was it? First pitch, I think, is 4:00 tomorrow. So we're just a little over 24 hours away. I should have
maybe 3 o'clock. I think it's a 10 a.m. start my time. So 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3 p.m. I think Eastern.
3:05 p.m. Yep. 3:05 p.m.
Look at me doing math first thing in the morning. All right. It is my favorite time of the show. Questions and comments are coming your way. We're going to get into all of your questions and all of your comments and try and answer as much as we can. We're going to get into that coming up in just a minute. Before we do that, I want to shout out the sponsor of today's podcast, FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets back with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 back if your bet wins. You can bet on all of your favorite NBA action, players, and teams right now with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and much, much more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to shoot your shot. And if you want to get in on some baseball action early, you can bet on the Reds' odds to win the National League Central. They actually have the third best odds to win the NL Central right now. The Reds are plus 410 to win, with the Cardinals, the freaking Cardinals, being favored at plus 140. Cubs are just behind them at plus 240. The Brewers have moved to plus 550. And of course, bringing up the rear, Ethan Smith over at Locked On Pirates and his Pittsburgh Pirates, holding down a strong 16-1 return. I wonder if there's an ability to build a parlay over at FanDuel that is the National League Central odds here with plus 410. Throw in, I don't know, that over under that dropped back to 81.5 games. Take the over. And then maybe for good measure, as a third leg of the parlay, throw in Ellie De La Cruz on his over under of stolen bases and take the over there as well. I think that would be a nice little parlay. I'm going to go see if they'll let me build that out. I'm not sure if you can stack the season bets that way, but I'm going to go try. because that sounds fun. And if you want to go have fun, head over to FanDuel right now. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA and the official sportsbook of Locked On. You can follow us between episodes on social media. You can follow us on X. I'm at S. Offenbaker. That's with 2 Fs. You can follow Jeff at Jeff Carr. That's Jeff with 3 Fs. And you can follow the show at Locked On Reds. If you haven't done so, head over to InsideTheReds.com. Bookmark that site. I'm writing over there. Jeff's writing over there. Lots of other talented writers covering the Reds in written form. And join us on our Discord community. There is a link for our Discord community down in today's show description. We're talking Reds. We've got off-topic stuff. We've got gaming. We've got Bengals. We've got a little bit of something for everyone. Head over there and join us today. All right, Jeff, let's do this. Let's get into the questions and the comments because it's my favorite part of the show. And, it's hard for me coming into the question and comments because that means I don't get to preview them. So
let's start with this one. John Mark Blair had a question. He said, let's look at a fact. Will Benson went down, came back hitting well. He worked on it. He improved. This offseason, don't you imagine he's working on hitting lefties? His approach, as noted earlier, is, and I think he had more to that, can't see, is good. There it is good. I think Benson comes back and impresses. He's proved he can improve. And that is a key. I mean, that's a key ability when it comes to a major leaguer's longevity. His ability to stick on in this game is how do you continually improve? And I got to believe that he entered this offseason. Like we heard lots of reporting about Ellie and how he was working to get better and what he was doing and what David Bell and Freddie Benavides were doing with him. Can't imagine that Freddie Benavides and David Bell only talked to Ellie De La Cruz all offseason. I can't imagine that Ellie was the only one that was working. I believe that Will Benson probably knew he had two kind of directives as the offseason began. Number one, get more consistent with your fielding. And number two, hit lefties. I'd be interested to see what that does and how you can really it's hard because the whole idea and the only reason that lefties have trouble with lefty pitchers is the deception. Like lefties are very good at hiding the ball until the last second, so you can't pick up the spin and you can't pick up the grip and how they're releasing all that other stuff. So how does a player work on that without game action? I'd be very interested to see what he does with that this year and how many opportunities he is given to prove that.
I agree with you 100% that he's worked on his defense and get better at in the offseason. Here's the problem with saying, well, don't you think he worked on hitting lefties in the offseason? Well, yeah, I think he probably took some batting practice against left-handers, but unless it was major league pitchers throwing maximum effort breaking pitches with their left hand during the offseason, the only way he's going to get better is to face that stuff. And the only way we're going to know that he can get better is a prolonged exposure to it, a big sample size. And I just don't know that it's in the Reds' best interest to have two guys in Benson and Fraley trying to figure that out in season in a year where winning the division is a very real possibility, especially when you can say take Benson out of the lineup and put CES in it and also have Candelario and also have Marte and also have India and also have all these other guys in the lineup facing that same left-handed pitcher. I think, sure, he could do it. He could. And I could win the lottery and Jeff could shave his face. And there's lots of things that could happen, but
far more likely that Will Benson is working on left-handed than me shaving my face. That's
and I was going to say, are any of those things in anyone's best interest? It's not
right. But
it's
also,
not
so there's and this is like just kind of trying to put an exclamation point on what you're trying to say is that whatever he is doing to work against lefties, is he facing Hobie Milner from the Brewers? Like that dude killed the Reds last year as a relief pitcher. There's a lot of Brewers relief pitchers that did, but he was especially one. I felt like when Hobie Milner, what a name Hobie is, but when Hobie Milner came into the game, the Reds just stopped. There was nothing they could do against him. And that's the kind of guy, especially as a lefty, if you're going to beat somebody, that's the guy you got to be focused on. So how does that happen? That's going to be kind of a tough one to see. Like, I really want it to happen. Will Benson, I love Will Benson. And he is one of those guys that I'm like, you put it in front of him, I think he's going to figure out a way to conquer it. But there's a lot of just basic, life things of lefty on lefty that's really hard to overcome. Like, you've got to be some of the best to ever do it. Joey was one of the best to ever do it. You think of like Jay Bruce, he was actually a pretty good hitter against lefties as far as lefty hitters go, but those few are far between. There's plenty of lefties that just are useless against left-handed pitching.
All right. This from Dallas Hall. Why don't they put Ellie in center, TJ in right, Fraley and Benson platoon in left, McLean at short, Indy at second? That could very well be a configuration someday. It's probably not going to be this year. The Reds have made the decision that at least in 2024 that they are building the infield around Ellie De La Cruz. And it's, hard to argue what they're trying to do. They're trying to set up Ellie De La Cruz to be the superstar face of this franchise. In the absence of a true superstar face of this franchise, Matt McLean is going to be Mr. Consistent, blue collar. I still say put the C on his chest, make him the captain. But the flash, the swagger,
you have a C on your chest. You just not where you pointed. You pointed at it.
They're all over. There's bunches of them. They're everywhere. They are everywhere.
But yeah, I think
with Ellie, he should be. They're trying to build around him. They're trying to do something with him, and that configuration. There's some logic to it in moving him to the outfield, but
I think it's a future.
Aren't going to do that. It's a future consideration, and much more likely to end up as a third baseman, I think, than as an outfielder. But we'll see what time does. But for 2024, that's not going to happen. We are not going to see Ellie De La Cruz in the outfield in 2024 at all. That's my not so hot take.
No, I would agree with that. I think, and just based on deducing this and looking at how the roster moves and who's coming up, I think Ellie is this team's majority shortstop until Edwin Arroyo is major league ready. Edwin Arroyo, multiple people have said, is the best shortstop in this organization. Like, major leagues all the way down. He is the best fielder at shortstop. He has the best arm at shortstop. He has the best everything at shortstop. Now, the thing is, last year, he really kind of showed a hole in his game where he was kind of a light hitter. I think he's going to grow into that. That's going to be fine. But when he is major league ready, I think that's when you see the Reds start making these moves. You'll see Matt McLean back at second, all this other stuff. Like, Edwin Arroyo is going to be the guy. If he's not traded, he's going to be the shortstop of the future. You're going to see Ellie move to outfield, third base, whatever. I think when you're looking at positions of value on the field, shortstop is the most valuable position. And then probably second most valuable is center field. So could I see him moving to center field later on in his career? Yeah, maybe. But it's not going to be this year.
It can happen. And remember, when Arroyo arrives here, there's going to be other players that are here now that won't be. It's going to be the way this farm system is structured, and the plan that Nick Krall told us he was going to follow, and thus far has followed, involves roster churn. It's going to involve trading and restocking, and there's going to be some core guys around here. And you did a talk about them offering contracts to pitchers last year that didn't get accepted, but they're trying to sign a core, but the rest, the team around that core, is going to be a constant churn. So what the 2024 Reds look like, 2025, 2026 can be a completely different animal as far as where people are playing. So time will tell what happens with Ellie De La Cruz, but he's a shortstop this year. First, foremost, always. He'll play a little third base. He might DH occasionally. I don't see any circumstance where he starts a game in the outfield.
Yeah, no, it's a very good idea, and it seems logical. His, the way that he is built, he's not built like a shortstop. He's built like an outfielder, and we can see, you don't even have to really close your eyes to see it, him robbing a home run at the wall and then throwing somebody out who thought they could take an extra base on that home run. Like, I can see all of those things happening, but I also know that as of right now in his career, they are still trying to get him comfortable at the major league level. And so I don't think they want to add to his plate. Oh, we're going to change your position.
You see, he's so tall. He wouldn't even have to jump, right, to rob a home run.
Yeah,
Can he just reach up and I got it. Yeah. Let's go to this one from Main Street Duel here. It says, I'd be less concerned about guys dealing with injuries if I had more faith in the medical staff. Their track record hasn't been good. If I was a player, I'd be getting second opinions all the time. I think this is a fair point. I've been critical now for a couple years on this medical staff. I have been really disappointed at the way some things have been handled. We can go back to Jonathan India's hamstring. When, the second that it happened, I started texting you, Jeff, like, this is what they need to do. They need to shut him down. If they don't, here's what's going to happen. And they didn't. And all of those things happened. And it wasn't rocket science for anybody that's had any exposure to the medical field at all. So some of the things they've done scream to me of a inability or an unwillingness. And it's not about being good at their jobs. I think they've had an inability or an unwillingness to stand up to these players or to stand up to people in the front office and actually apply the knowledge that they have. And I would suspect it's more about the players. I've said often that someone has to be in charge of protecting these players from themselves. Because if you ask them, are you good to go? Can you play? Yeah, put me in, coach. I'm ready to play. I'm fine. Meanwhile, your hamstring's detached from your bone. That's bad. Right. Someone's got to be in charge of protecting these players. I think the medical staff has not done a good job of that, Jeff. I think that that would be the difference maker for them to take a common sense approach to some of the injuries that the Reds face throughout the years. Have the Reds been hurt more than other teams? I don't know. Haven't compiled the data. It feels like it because we watch this team every day. But I do feel like there's a disproportional amount of times that the Reds play shorthanded, that they tell you a guy's coming back in 3 days and it turns into 15 days, that a player that should be healthy now is instantly re-injured. I just feel like there's a disproportional amount of that going on in Cincinnati. Maybe not necessarily the initial injuries, but the aftermath of the injuries feels a little out of kilter. And maybe there's something there. I may research that a little bit more to get a definitive answer on it.
That's kind of the angle that I take with this, is that I don't necessarily know, and we won't know because that's very behind the scenes. It's very protected. We won't know what the communication is like with the player who is hurt. What I do know is David Bell is constantly giving updates about injured players during post-game pressers or something like that, where he's just like, oh yeah, he's going to be back in 20 minutes. And then he's out for a month. Like it feels like there's just no communication for the timeline. Like it feels like either the med staff doesn't know the timeline and David Bell is giving his best guess, his most optimistic guess about it, or they give him a time frame and he picks the earliest time frame. Like when you got a pizza in the oven or something, you got a DiGiorno and it says you got to cook it for 15 to 20 minutes. You put it on 15 to make sure it doesn't burn. That's not the right thing, I think, with prognoses. I think he's just got to be like, yo, he's going to be back when he's going to be back. And as much as that's not as not as reassuring, not giving us an actual timeline, I think we've been burned too much by he's going to be back super quick, and they're just not. Like Nick Lodolo, multiple times last year, was supposed to be back, and he never was back.
Josh checks in, and we made fun of Mike Ford, but Josh is coming to Mike Ford's defense a little bit. Josh says Mike Ford could be potentially good value if the Reds end up needing him / keeping him. Josh says he has friends in Seattle and that say that Ford fulfilled his role in a way the team was constructed pretty well last year. Not a knock on Ford, Josh, and really, if Mike Ford has an at bat for the Reds in 2024, something has gone horribly wrong. Mm-hmm. There is just way too much depth, way too much talent, way too much other people that you need to see any scenario where Ford finds his way onto the active roster and does something for this team. You don't have to squint as hard to see Josh Harrison as a 26th man, but I just don't see it. What Ford can be is a valuable guy down at AAA, helping other guys along, showing what it's like to be a professional, veteran depth. But if he was to get a call up, it'd be very, very bad.
Yeah, he's an interesting case because the thing that everyone is going to latch onto is the fact that last year in 219 at bats, he had a 475 slugging percentage. That's pretty awesome. Everything else is just kind of like his entire career. He has a 309 on base. His entire career, he has played first base. Like I'm trying to look here at his fielding. Yeah. He's played first base and DH. That's it. He doesn't play anywhere else. And the Reds kind of have plenty of guys who can play first base and DH. And he's a lefty too. He's not a righty. But I mean, could he be, if you've got some injuries and all this, and he can be like the last guy on the bench for a pinch hit homer or something like that? Yeah, I mean, we're squinting really hard here, but that's kind of what I see him as. Like, I think that he's probably just more spring training depth than he is anything else. And they're trying to give him, some tape to give to other teams.
All right, let's go to this from John Mark. And this season, it's never not going to make me laugh, folks. I'm just John Mark says he wants Steer to play every day along with McLean and Ellie. After that, let Tinkerbell put whomever wherever he's going to anyway. Tinkerbell, Jeff, I don't know how much longer I can resist some Photoshop pieces for the show that involve Tinkerbell. But to the point. Yes, Spencer Steer should play is 150 games, as well as Matt McLean and Ellie De La Cruz. What we've heard from David Bell and what we've heard from Nick Krall is that guys are going to get more rest than you would expect. And that's a product of A, trying to get everybody into the game, and B, trying to keep guys from running out of gas in what everyone involved with this team, both front office and coaching staff, believes is going to be a playoff season. They want everybody to still have something left when this team reaches the postseason. So that being said, I think 150 games would be the max we would see anybody, and 140 sounds much more likely. Tinker's going to tinker. You're absolutely right. There's going to be, starting lineups, starting pitchers, starting rotation, starters. I think that probably still matters to the players. I think that probably still matters to that athletic ego. But at the end of the day, in modern baseball, playing the percentages, using the analytics, everybody's playing in every game. And whether you're playing the first 4 innings, the last 4 innings, or only in there for the 9th, you're going to get playing time nearly every day, just the way that David Bell runs this team. Because if you're a left-handed hitter, Will Benson, say, and you started the game, the second that the Reds get into the opposing team's bullpen, the pitch hitters are coming, and you're going to get the righties off the bench. That's just the way that Bell works. So, games started, games played. Everybody on this team could see 140 games. Starts, I don't know that it matters. Wins, losses, to us. I'm sure it matters to the players.
Right. And I think that when you hear a player talk about some different statistics that they love, like Joey has always maintained that his favorite statistic is games played. He doesn't talk about at bats. He doesn't talk about games started. He talks about games played, and just getting into the game, especially with the way that how teams have so many avenues of information when it comes to a player's health, when it comes to a player's usage throughout the year. I got the chance. I talked with the Dragons pitching coach and kind of how they monitor a pitcher's workload throughout the year. And they do have far more than even just the number of pitches that a guy has on his arm. Like, they have so much more information that they can draw upon. And with all of that information now, most teams, it's not just the Reds, and it's not just the overly analytical driven teams as opposed to some other teams that maybe are behind on that. Everyone is using some form of information that is telling them it's not as sexy as it used to be to play 162 games. The reason that people go through slumps when they play 162 games is at some point their body just starts rejecting the fact that they played 162 games. Like, we always talk about this, and TJ Friedel mentioned this in an interview. He was talking about his bunting prowess and stuff like this the other day. He mentioned this. He said, I use my bunting to help me through slumps because we know we're going to go through slumps. Even the best players ever have gone through slumps. And I think that there's a lot of data out there that is showing that they're like, yeah, the reason you go through slumps is that there's some points where you're just really, really tired. And we need to mitigate that time in your season. Does that mean that you're not going to play 162 games? Yes. Does that diminish your importance to this team? No.
All right. Before we get into the next one, Jeff, just everybody that's still here, thank you for being with us and doing these live shows and being in the comments and asking questions. And this is so much fun. I enjoy these so much. These will be coming to an end soon when the season gets started. As far as the every Aloha Friday,
yeah.
we will try to drop a few in during the course of the season. Don't you worry. But just to
And
let you know, as a programming note, as spring training wraps up, we won't be doing these every Friday anymore.
And I did see something back here. Yeah. Carrie asks, are you guys doing game follow-ups? If so, when? And I think, just game recaps, stuff like that. Those will be kind of sprinkled throughout the season. They won't necessarily be super regular. We might try and do like some different series recaps and things like that. Or if something crazy happens, I mean, last year, when Ellie hit the cycle, we were live right after that game. Different things like that is usually when we go live. It won't be as consistent though, as we might like, because to be honest with you, there's just a lot of days we're just not able to do right after the game ends.
Right.
So apologies about that, but we will be all throughout the season. We'll be with you every single day.
And if you're still here watching today, again, appreciate you. Do me a favor right now. We're here on YouTube. We're live. Go down and click the like button right now.
Yes.
It helps the algorithm. It brings people to the show. And that's really what we're trying to do, is just reach as many Reds fans as possible. So go down there and click that like button right now for me. I really appreciate it. It helps us grow. And that's what we want to do. We love talking Reds baseball with you. I want to get into a comment from Jeffrey Miller. It's split between two. It's really long. So I'm not going to throw it up on the screen, Jeff, but I'm going to kind of paraphrase it and get your thoughts on it. He's asking about the injuries. And basically he opens saying, what's up with all these injuries? They've just started spring training. It's really early to have these kind of injuries. And he goes on to say that in this day of weight training and nutrition, these injuries shouldn't happen. And maybe they need to go back to the old way of eating Big Macs. It seemed to work back in the day. Here's the thing. Some of these spring training injuries, you have to look at them through the lens of what the coaches and the medical staff. A lot of these injuries, if this were a playoff series, these guys would play.
Yeah.
If this was, game 7 of the National League Championship Series to get into the World Series, this guy would be in the lineup. But they're not doing that in February. They're not going to tell Graham Ashcraft, you by God are pitching today. I don't care if your toe hurts. They're not doing that. So that's some of it. Also, this list of injuries to start spring training, Jeffrey, is carryover. Nick Lodolo's not injured. He didn't get hurt out in Goodyear. He's coming off of this injury and they're being cautious. Same with Ashcraft. Same with Montas. They're going to be very careful with his shoulder. Now, Montas, to listen to him, and God, I've loved his interviews and what we've seen from him so far in the video, but he tells you he's 100% ready to go. Protect these players from themselves. Make him be cautious. Those are the kind of things they're doing right now. So I'm not overly concerned at all about what this list looks like right now. I'll be a little concerned if the list is still the list on, March 25th when they're getting ready to head to Cincinnati. But right now, I'm not overly concerned. I think that this is just a normal part of baseball, and injuries are a normal part of baseball. Guys are going to get tweaked. Guys are going to get hurt.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, the Reds are not alone in this. Most of the league deals with things like this, either carryover injuries or, you look at the Baltimore Orioles in the case that Kyle Bradish, like one of the first days of camp, sprained his UCL. They realized it wasn't a tear. They don't need to do Tommy John, but he will miss some time because he sprained it just working it out. Matt McClain sprained his oblique because he took too many swings. It happens. That's kind of how this stuff goes. They're just getting back into the swing of things, pun intended, when it comes to Matt McClain. But when you really look at these injuries as a whole, it's just, these are reports out of spring training. This is not so-and-so is on the injured list right now. It's like somebody's dealing with a little bit of tweak of something. They're athletes. It's going to happen.
This from Joseph Gaditza. Joseph, how you doing? I like that name. Joseph Gaditza. Fun to say. A bounce back season from Ty Steve would be huge for this lineup. If he tightens up defensively too, Joseph says he'll be thrilled. Tyler Stevenson's talked a lot about the defense. He's talked about wanting to be one of the best catchers in the game, and, lofty goal. I understand. And that's kind of the swagger I want to see. But the fact of the matter is, Joseph, you are absolutely right. Tyler Stevenson that is amongst catchers in the top third of the league, maybe the top 10% of the league, batting 7, 8, 9 in this lineup with all of the mashers and the guys that can get on base in front of him. Tyler could have a huge season offensively. And no, he's not going to stop with the 40 home runs, guys. He's not going to hit 40 home runs. But he could be really productive in the 7, 8, 9 spot in this lineup. Defensively, I think there were times last season where he wasn't as sharp as we expected that he should be. I still contend that for the first part of the season, he was feeling that collarbone. But we've been seeing plenty of video, Jeff, that he's working on defensively. He beat the hell out of the fake pig during defensive drills. If you watch the videos, that pig was not going to score. So, I like the work that we're seeing put in. And I think J.R. House is doing a good job of helping get Tyler Stevenson ready to be catcher number one and be a serious contender to be one of the better, if not one of the best catchers in baseball in 2024.
What a brave new world we live in, that we got remote control pigs is like the way that you practice tagging at the plate. That was a great video. I had to watch it like multiple times. Like, what is that? What's he tagging there? Oh, it's a pig. Oh, okay. Also, I like this, and I think it's an underrated thing, because there's a thing in communication that it's not just the words that you say. It's not even the actions that you do. Sometimes it's how you present yourself. This right here, the scruff, I'm digging the scruff. When you come into spring training, you got the scruff going on. You're telling me that you're already changing things up. Things are going to be different this year for Tyler Stevenson. You get the scruff going on, and as a proponent of facial hair, I really think that this was a good move by him. I hope he keeps it. Hope he keeps it throughout the season.
That poster's on your wall, isn't it? It's okay. I'm not judging.
I just downloaded it. I got to print it. I haven't printed it yet.
The poster's on your wall, isn't it? All right, let's do this. We haven't talked about this, Jeff, at all. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this mess for a minute. Is anyone going to talk about Major League Baseball's new see-through pants? The new uniforms are god-awful. This from Vic Tim. Vic, the new uniforms are god-awful. They screwed up the jerseys. They screwed up the pants. Listen, the first time it rains, the home team, it's going to be sell out, all women in the crowd.
Did you?
These dudes are gonna be naked. They're going to be naked.
Did you see Rob Manfred's quote about these uniforms?
I did not. He said, tell what Manfred Hates Baseball had to say.
He said the Fanatics produced Nike branded jerseys are performance uniforms. And I'm like stolen base performances or Magic Mike performances? Like, what are we talking? Performance uniforms? Like, come on. Was correct lettering slowing somebody down? Like they couldn't get around on the ball? These uniforms are terrible. It's terrible. And look, as bad as the jerseys were, the see-through pants. Yeah. Are you telling me that the Nike brand could not afford somebody to, I don't know, try on the prototype before they went into production? Yeah,
it's horrible. It's terrible.
You got sheer uniform style. I hope everyone, the first guy that walks up to the plate with like red underwear or something, that's gonna be kind of fun to see, or black underwear or something you just see through. You're like, hey, there he's got the Eddie Bauer on. Look at that. That's pretty good and really comfy there. You're gonna find out real fast.
You're gonna find out real fast which Major League Baseball players wear thongs. This is what I'm saying.
The number's greater than zero. We
talk
know that.
About screw around and find out. We're going to find out some things we never wanted to know. I think what's going to happen.
So is the Fanatics is the 2024 season, the motto for the 2024 MLB season is the year of the Chippendale? Is that where we're going with this? Because that's what it seems like.
Hey, listen. Rob Manfred has always talked about trying to grow the baseball audience.
Grow the audience.
Well, grow the audience.
Because shift the paradigm, get a new group, get a new genre.
All right, let's. That's enough of that freaking. Jesus. All right, this from Angelo. Funny how many experts, quote unquote, air quote, experts are passing on Friedel. This is your guy, Jeff. Tell me why, because I'm going to tell you why I'm still a little not convinced. Tell me why I should have faith and be perfectly happy, fine with TJ Friedel as the everyday outfielder in 2024. Everyday center.
I believe that Friedel's got this ability, and he is super baseball smart. I just don't think we've seen enough guys that are this smart. I mean, obviously Joey Votto was one of the smartest baseball players that ever played, but I think TJ Friedl is super underrated in how smart he is. He's super underrated in everything. I mean, he was on nobody's prospect list. He did actually get a vote for MVP last year, which was kind of cool to see. He had a really good season, but I think as we continue to move forward, we continually underrate him because we're like, well, he's later on in his career. He's not necessarily, I mean, not late in his career, but he's later on than some of the younger guys on this team. He just doesn't profile well. And like when you look at his peripheral stats, his quality of contact, his average exit velocity is low and things like that. It's like, yeah, because a good number of his hits come from bunts and the average exit velocity on a bunt is pretty crappy. Like I'd love to see the numbers if you weed out the bunts, his actual swings and stuff like that. He is smart to the point, and he had this interview, and I mentioned it just before, but he understands like, all right, I know what I got to do to get us a win. Is it a stolen base? Is it taking an extra base? Is it laying down a bunt? Is it hitting a homer? Is it making this sliding catch? Whatever it is. I think he understands how to put himself in the positions to make those plays. And while you can have these uber talented players and all this other stuff, you need guys like TJ Friedl on your team that know how to set themselves up and set their teammates up for success.
All right. I don't want to be, good grief. I don't want to be negative about TJ Friedl because I don't want some ridiculous hashtag associated with my TJ Friedl takes, much like you hate Jonathan India hashtag. But looking at TJ Friedl, I need to know who he really is. And I don't think we know who he really is. In 2022, he got into 72 games. That is not a small sample size, Jeff. In those 72 games, his WAR was 0.2. He put up 0.2 WAR over 72 games. Fast forward to 2023. He gets into 138 games, shows that he can hit lefties somehow, and his WAR jumps to 3.8. If TJ Friedl is a consistent 3.8 to 4 WAR, that is amazing. That is a win for the Reds. That is a win for us. That is a win for everybody involved. But from 0.2 to 3.8 between his age 26 and 27 season, I don't know who he really is. And there is a whole lot banking on TJ Friedl being the 3.8 WAR TJ Friedl for the Reds to have a successful season. There's not a backup plan in center field right now. There is, if TJ Friedl is the 0.2 WAR guy in the year 2024, the Reds have big problems because you have lost your leadoff hitter. So I want to be cautiously optimistic. I want to believe that the TJ Friedl of 2023 is the TJ Friedl we are going to have moving forward. What is more likely is maybe he's a 2 WAR guy. Maybe he's a replacement level or better major league fielder, major league hitter. That's not the guy that we need at the top of the lineup. We don't need just a so-so guy leading off this lineup, setting the table for the guys that are going to be mashing coming after him. So I want to be cautious, but I want to believe that TJ Friedl can still be this guy that he was in 2023 for the reasons you said. He is baseball smart. He is able to read the defenses. He's able to take advantage and use his speed and use his bunting ability and do all those things. League's going to adjust. The question is, how does TJ Friedl adjust to the adjustments in 2024? So I'm cautious. I'm not down on TJ Friedl, but I'm cautious.
I would say, and there's a lot that goes into the differences between 2022 and 2023, but I can start out with this. The car that Cionel Perez used to drive from Louisville to Cincinnati was passed over to TJ Friedl in 2022. Like 2021, we saw Cionel Perez get sent down no less than 114 times and brought back up 114 times. And then I think in 2022, we saw TJ Friedl get sent down about 145 times and called back up 145 times. He was just up and down so much. And then there was a point where things began to click. It was too late in the season for him to go crazy and set those numbers up. But like you're talking about, the way that he was able to kind of reinvent himself as a hitter. He is a smart eye at the plate. I mean, he had a difference in batting average and on-base percentage by almost 90 points. That's a very good margin. You want to talk about guys that have a large gap between, in a good way, of batting average and on-base percentage. Because I always think of like a couple of years ago, Yasmani Grandal for the White Sox. I think he had like a $150 batting average, but he got on base about 38% of the time. It was this crazy, crazy gap. It'll never be that dramatic, but the fact that he hit 279 but still managed to get on base even more than that, I think that he's got a good eye, and I think he's got a great ability for just disruption. You need that guy at the top of your order that no pitcher can really be comfortable with, because the moment they think they got him, he's just going to be able to make the contact and he's going to be able to put the ball in play. And you're going to have somebody on base. I mean, especially later on in the game, whenever you turn the lineup over, Will Benson's going to be on base. Tyler Stevenson's going to be on base. And TJ Friedel's going to be up there making contact. I just think that he fits on this team. And I don't necessarily know that I'm going to advocate for him to get much higher on the WAR chart. I don't think that I'm going to advocate and say, yeah, he could be a 5 WAR guy. He could be an MVP level guy.
Well, and when we did our show on WAR, when we were kind of breaking down statistics for folks, if I remember correctly, a 4.0 WAR is considered an all-star.
Yeah.
There we go. You still had the chart on. Look at you, Jeffrey Carr, being prepared.
Still got the chart here. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the audio folks, Jeff Scrub, I'm pretty sure that there's no statistical category in Scrub, but 0 to 1 WAR, role player 1 to 2, solid starter 2 to 3, good player 3 to 4, all-star 4 to 5, superstar 5 to 6, 6+ Joey Votto, MVP. Right. So yeah, I mean, he was just 0.2 from being an all-star.
And that's depending on who you look at, because Baseball Reference had him there. Fangraphs had him at 4.4.
So I'm with you, Jeff. I want to believe in him. I'm not downing on him. I need one more season of something to decide who he really is, and then I'll be ready. I'll be ready to be all in on the TJ Friedel hype train. My Aunt Rox there in Springfield loves this guy. She asks me every week, Friedel's still with the team, right? Every week.
Still with it. Yep.
Still with the team. Let's go to this from Tyler. Tyler Farrell checks in, says he is a big believer in Jake Fraley and believes that Jake doesn't get as much hype and recognition that he deserves. And this is probably a fair take. First of all, are they going to stick with the Viking celebration? Have we heard? Are we going with the Viking helmet again this year?
I have not heard, but I have to imagine
that there are bobbleheads this year of Fraley that have the Viking, the whole Viking get up. So I hope they stick with that. But to Tyler's point, yeah, we don't talk about Jake Fraley enough. I don't think. I was concerned with the offseason news about the illness for his daughter. We got great updates about that she's doing great, that, Fraley is in a good spot as far as, where his family is at. So he's going to be a contributor to this team. Like I was saying earlier, games started, games played. Jake Fraley's going to play a lot of games for this team in 2024. He may not necessarily start a bunch of them, but he's going to play in a lot of games in 2024. And I think that he is valuable switching in to play the handedness of a pitcher, to try and beat up on an opposing bullpen. He brings a ton of power into the game. He can play a serviceable center field if he has to. Defensively, you can put him pretty much in all 3 spots, better in the corners. But if had to get him into center field, he could play there. He's valuable for this team. Is he the 4th outfielder on this team? Because of the wonky splits and what the Reds are going to try to do, he's probably the 5th outfielder on this team, but he's going to play a lot. He's going to be valuable. And I'm not concerned at all if I hear, now batting Jake Fraley coming into the game. I'm good with that. I think he brings a lot to the team.
No, and he's a perfect candidate as well. The difference in average and on base percentage, I think he's a very smart hitter. He had a very low strikeout percentage last year, right around 18%. And he's a guy, and I saw somebody, and I'm forgetting who made this point. And if you're in the comment section, I'd be happy for you to take a bow on this, but made the point that before his injury last year, he was a really good player. And because he did kind of fall off, he fractured the 4th toe on his left foot. I'm remembering that report. He fractured the fourth toe on his left foot, and he played through that the rest of the year and then had surgery at the end of the season. He, before that surgery, was hitting 268 with a 349 on base and a 475 slugging with a 117 OPS, WRC plus, OPS plus, that sort of thing. That's pretty good. And the fact that those numbers are buoyed by a BABIP that was actually below league average. He had a 286 BABIP. It's about 10 points, 13 points below league average. So he might have actually been getting a little bit unlucky with his 268 batting average. And I think it's interesting to note that in the isolated power, something we don't talk about a lot, but the difference between batting average and slugging percentage was over 200 points. He was really good with the extra base hits, really good with the clutch doubles. I felt like if somebody was on base, especially if somebody was in runners in scoring position, we saw him lace a double into the gap more often than not. And he's a guy that will be interesting to watch moving forward. I just think that the upside of Will Benson kind of gives him more playing time than Jake Fraley gets. But you're right. If Jake Fraley's coming up to the plate, I'm not sad about it.
So, housekeeping note, Josh says it was him.
Good job, Josh.
There you go. And then let's do one more and get out of here. We have blown past the hour mark and I didn't even realize it. That's why I love these shows so much. Let's take this from Patrick to wrap it up. Patrick Riley asks, where does Ellie hit in the order, especially against lefties? Oh, I like Ellie around 5'6" until he has the opportunity to get it together. I know you like him higher. Your article over at Inside the Reds had him batting third, I think, and I wanted him down around 5'6".
Yeah, I think somewhere around third or fourth is where I'm at with him. I could see the argument that, probably out of the gate, maybe he doesn't deserve that high of a spot, but I think eventually that's where he's going to be. The platoon split is interesting for me because he is super different. Right-handed pitchers last year, he hit 256 with a 328 on base. Against lefties, 184, 231 on base, 263 slugging. So yeah, that's definitely something that's got to improve. I mean, against lefties, and it's interesting too, because I saw this when I was kind of writing about him and his raw abilities. He is the fastest runner when it comes home to first, guys, getting to first base. He's the fastest out of the left-hand batter's box, and he's the fourth fastest runner out of the right-handed batter's box. It's just, I don't think his eye, I feel like, and obviously you're seeing out of a different,
Could he end up not being a switch hitter at some point along the way? Could they
always
just
feel like
him
that's
turned around or just have him bat lefty all the time?
I always feel like that's a possibility, especially because you're faster, you're able to get out of the box quicker. The switch hitter thing to me can sometimes be a little bit of a red herring. There's some pretty decent switch hitters out there, and Jeimer Candelario is a pretty decent switch hitter as well. That has
his splits. If you look at his splits, you pretty much get the same guy no matter which side of the plate he's batting on.
Exactly, and that's just not. I feel like we could see those splits normalize a little bit more this year for Ellie. But yeah, no, I mean you're absolutely right. He's got to improve against left-handed pitching, and you probably see him higher in the lineup against righties than against lefties, but at the end of the day, he's got more power than anybody on this team. He's got more speed than anybody on this team. He deserves to be at the top of the lineup so long as he's not hitting like $150.
All right, guys, I think that is going to be at the spot where we wrap it up. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the questions in the comments. We appreciate you guys so much. If you haven't clicked that like button yet, before you sign off, before you close out, click that like button for us. Help us drive this show to all of the Reds fans out there because we want to talk baseball with them, just like we love talking baseball with you. And on that note, Jeffrey, get us out of here.
On that note, it's time to end. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. You can trust us. We'll be all over the rest of spring training news as the Reds make more moves, have more minor league signings, maybe a couple of waiver claims coming up here soon as teams kind of move their rosters around. And you can trust us to be all over who's going to be starting, who's going to be in the lineup, all that great stuff, because we are Locked On Reds every single day.
It's a good thing you didn't have the Reds medical staff when you fell off the rowing machine at Orange Theory.
Yeah, I just healed myself like superpower.